And the guy who signed us was a guy called Mark Dean, and he'd discovered Wham and a band called ABC, megastars in the pop world, and he wanted a rock band, and we were the rock band he wanted to break. And on the day of signing, we needed to sell 500,000 albums to break even. It was big money. The video, which was awesome actually, that was $100,000 just to do the video. MCA had an idea, and this was just when MTV was breaking through, and there's loads of bands who were getting famous on the back of MTV. There was a video story that was put forward for another band, but the other band didn't have the balls to do it. So we said, we'll do it. And it was on a skyscraper that was being built in New York, Times Square.
Okay, so the first question as always then is, how did you get started in music and when did you join your first band?
Right. I got started in music in around about 1977.
You are old.
Yes, very, very old. And do you want the interesting story that led up to it?
Nothing interesting, no.
Okay, this is not interesting at all. But back in those days, when darts first became the big thing in this country, I used to play darts every day at work. And me and my mate Andy decided to go and be darts experts on the Isle of Wight. This is all true. So we went down to the Isle of Wight when no one else was there. And our first darts match was in this pub with some locals. And what happened was we were beating them, and then we put a bet on. And they'd actually ripped us off, and they sort of hammered us, and we spent all our money in the bets. So we came home, and basically we were there 4 days. And basically Andy said, what are we going to do now? And I said, let's be rock stars. And that's the truth. So we went down to London. He bought a Gibson Les Paul, and I bought a Fender Premier bass. And that was how we started being in the band.
How old were you then?
21. And that didn't go too well.
So could you play bass at that point?
No. No, he couldn't play guitar and I couldn't play bass. But this was in the age of punk. So basically...
No one could.
So, well, that was the idea. Actually, they all could really, but the big thing about the punk was that they couldn't play. They just got together and they did it. So we did that. And it didn't go very good because I was damn cool in those days, even cooler than I am now. And so what happened was, because I looked so good, and this is the truth. No, seriously. So I put an advert in the Birmingham Evening Mail and basically said, cool looking bass player needs cool looking band. And I did actually get loads of replies. And I went to one of the auditions, which was a band called Kerberos, which morphed into Trouble, which obviously you know about with Huey and whatever. And that's where we started getting noticed in that band Trouble. And that was going very, very well. I don't know how much you want to know here. I mean,
yeah, just go for it.
Because this can go on forever. So, but the singer in Trouble was not very cool, so we had to go because the whole thing in those days was how good you look, not how good you were. So we got rid of him and got another singer in and another guitar player in, and morphed into a band called Korea. And Korea, which was we started doing really, really well as Korea. And basically we started not auditioning, but we did start getting stuff out to record labels. And I'm saying it's really boring, but we all took a day off and went down to London in our stage clothes. Went around all the record labels, which we didn't know were record labels. We just went into the offices, asked if we could speak to the A&R person. There's normally some girl on the counter, probably still the same, who's all dressed up, because they always were sort of the pretty girls with blonde and all the rest of it, who were working on reception, and basically left our demo tape. Cassette tapes is what they were in them days. But we actually went into Warren Chappell, which was a publishing company, but we didn't know anything about it. We thought it was just a record label. And I'm telling this story because this is without doubt the best day in my music career. Even apart from getting the bands and all of it, this is the best day. And we went into the reception of these really posh offices, and there's all these people in the corner, all dressed up, all these blokes all dressed up in loincloths and things like that. And we're thinking, weird, but odd. Anyway, a guy comes down the lift, gets out the lift, and we didn't know who he was. And he looks at us and he says, "You're not here for them." We said, "What are you here for?" Not knowing what it was, we said, "We want to meet the A&R guy." "Have you got an appointment?" "No, we just want to meet him." And he said, "Come with me." And it turns out he was the A&R guy. There's a big hit in that year for a band called Tight Fit, and the song was The Line Sleeps Tonight, and all these guys were there auditioning to be in the video for The Line Sleeps Tonight. Anyway, this guy said, I don't want to mess with them. Let's go upstairs. Took us in the lift. Getting out the lift was Robert Plant. So we're going, fuck you know. Robert Plant, can you put that in?
Robert Plant?
No swearing.
Oh, yeah, you can
No,
swear.
that's okay then. So basically, Robert Plant gets out. We're going in, thinking it's the best day of our lives. We go into his office. He plays the demo, the cassette, stops it after 3 seconds and goes, do you want a beer? And we think we're in. And that was easily the best moment in my music career, the excitement of thinking we're going to get a deal. Turns out this was a guy called Robin Godfrey Cass, who goes to loads of the networking nights that we go to, but I've never got to speak to him. And the one I was going to speak to him, that was the one last week, which we didn't go to. But I'm going to meet this guy. He's my biggest hero in publishing. And on the back of that, we got to do a showcase for a guy called John Kolodner at Geffen Records, who at that moment in time was the biggest A&R guy in the world. And they were one of the biggest rock labels in the world. But in the meantime, I'd got an access bill. This is the truth. I got an access bill, access credit card bill of 1,200 quid that people were chasing me for ages to pay this debt off. And as I was living in flats at the time, they couldn't contact me. But what I did the one day, I went back to my mum's house and I was working on an old Mini at the front of the house. And I got out from under the car and the guy said, oh, hello, Roy. And I go, yes, mate. And he slapped me with a letter. He chucked me down. This was the summons for owing the 1,200 quid. And what had happened in the meantime, another band of mates in a band called Shy, they'd asked me to join, and thinking I'm going to get a big deal with Korea, I kept saying no, no, no. And then they asked me again, the manager asked me, he said, would you join? I said, would you pay me access card off? And he said, we'll pay your access card off. I said, in that case, I'm your man. And that is a long-winded way, probably bored him in playback, of how I come to join Shy.
So did Shy have a deal at that point?
Shy, they just signed. No, they hadn't. But they were really, really close to getting their deal. They hadn't signed the paperwork, and in the meantime, we were going to do a big showcase at a place called JB's in Dudley, for Geffen. And the day we did that showcase was the day that Shy actually signed their record deal. And after that signed, and they signed in London, then all come up to Dudley to see us do the showcase. We didn't get the deal with Geffen, so it was time to move to Shy to pay off the access bill, which they did. But I managed to run up debts many times. So
That's amazing. I didn't know that. JB's in Dudley was the first place I sneaked into underage as well.
Well, this would have been a different JB's, because the JB's, the big one that you know in Dudley,
Right.
morphed out of this one. It was a smaller one, about the same size as the Asylum,
Oh, okay.
called Pathfinders. And nobody listening to this is going to have a clue what we're on about. But that was a brilliant gig at JB's. Very much like what the Railway used to be in Birmingham. Every night there's a band on. Every night was always a good band. So you just go down, like the Birmingham scene at the time. We used to go out knowing you're going to see a good band. And it was an absolutely thriving Birmingham scene then when bands were going off and getting deals. So we were all supposed to be rich and famous, but obviously it didn't happen.
What was the deal? How big was it when you got the one with Shy?
Well, the one that Shy did with RCA, as it was then, which became BMG, was £1 million or $1 million, one of the two. Basically, at that period in time, it was one of the biggest bands ever for an unknown band. And that was in an era when all the majors, there was 6 majors basically. And I always wanted to sign to EMI. It was the biggest of the lot. But RCA was pretty good. They'd got David Bowie, Elvis Presley, the Eurythmics. They were all signed at the same time as us. Well, no, obviously Bowie and what's his name was signed long before us, but Eurythmics were signed, and a band called the Blow Monkeys, which nobody's ever heard of, but they had a big hit back in the 80s. We all signed at the same time. They all went on to make vast fortunes. I didn't make any money.
What manager was it at that point? Is that the one that...
Well, that was a guy called Barry Keane, who had a company called Dreamstar, which is all very interesting, really. And funny enough, Craig Jennings, who is obviously the head of Raw Power and manages Bring Me and Bullies and bands like that, he was actually the office boy at that time in Birmingham for Dreamstar. So I've actually known Craig since that would have been about 1983, 1984.
What was the band spending the money on, with the deals and videos and stuff like that? And when did you start playing big shows?
Well, essentially all the money, and the same goes now, you don't really have the money yourself. The money goes to recording your records, going on tour, paying for the crews. And it was quite funny because when I first joined, and none of us knew anything. We knew nothing about the business and nothing whatsoever. And as it turned out, really, the management knew nothing about the business either, because they were all new to it. And one of the very first things I did when we were talking about money, it turned out, I mean, at the very beginning, we were on 60 quid a week. That's all we were on. And we had a lighting engineer who was quite well known at the time. And he was the lighting guy who went out on tour and all that type of stuff. And he was on 400 quid a week. That was the fee back then that he was charging the management company. So one of the first things I did was went in and went through this stuff and go, well, how can he possibly on 400 quid a week? And we're on 60 quid a week. There's obviously something very wrong with this. Because even now, 400 quid a week, unless you were working all the time, you would argue the toss. So obviously, he didn't like me for quite a long time because I stopped his money. And it turned out they ended up being a band called Magnum. He was their lighting engineer. We'd done a lot of stuff with Magnum. And consequently, when it came to us getting our lights on that Magnum tour, they weren't too great.
How many bands at the time were getting multi-million-pound deals?
Not many. The rule of thumb at that time, really, was the company would sign two bands every year with a major deal. There's, obviously it all changed. So given there was six majors, roughly you're talking about 12 major deals where, you were on big advances and all the rest of it. And it was real money then back in the 80s. I mean, they really were throwing money against the wall and seeing what stuck. I mean, that was the way it worked. And of the UK bands, none of them really went on to do anything. It was very, very limited because we were copying what all the Americans were doing. But there was another Birmingham band who we were mates with. They did the big deal with EMI, and they were called Tobruk, and they were all our mates. So we were hanging out with them and all the rest of it. So for us personally, it was a fantastic time, getting to go to all the events and stuff like that as part of a major deal.
So did you start playing big shows at that point?
I'm trying to think which the first big shows we did was probably, the first thing I did with them when I joined Shaw was a band called 12th Night, who you've never heard of now. They sort of disappeared, but they were like Marillion and those prog rock bands, which I fucking hate. But basically, we did a tour with them, and that was like an Odeon tour. All the Odeon picture races or cinemas in those days used to be where everybody played, where all the gigs were. And we did what's a Stalls only tour with them. And then from 12th Night, I think we went on and did Twisted Sister. And UFO, and all these bands were big bands in those times. And then the big one we sort of broke through on was doing Meatloaf, and that was an arena tour. But they were all bands in those days. It was all a lot of money. So the record companies were always spending money to get you onto those tours. So there's a lot of money, which means all you're doing really is getting a lot of debt.
Did you have an agent?
We never really, which was quite bizarre looking back now, we never really had our own agent. We did bits with, there was an agent called the Bron Agency, and there was a guy called Jerry Bron who owned it, and he did bands like Motorhead and stuff like that at the time. He took us on for some shows. We also worked for some shows with Neil Warnock, who's probably the most famous agent in the world at the minute now. He's retired now, but his son Ross Warnock, who still heads the company that he had. We did shows for him, but again, we never picked up our own agent. It was bizarre, and it was the record company who was getting us all the tours. So we never really had an agent, which is very, very odd.
And how many records were you selling?
I don't know how true this is, but we were told record sales in those days were completely different. So we were told we did 375,000 for Excess All Areas, which was on RCA. Now, in these days, I'd be a superstar on 375,000. But then bands were selling 1 million records as the norm. If you were going to be a touring band, a well-known band, you were doing 1 million records. It was a totally different. The one tour we did with Gary Moore, and in the first week in Germany, we did 7 nights in Germany. And on the back of 7 nights, we did 8,000 CDs, which again, 8,000 CDs now, the right time of year.
Would it have been a CD or would it have been a cassette or a...
Oh, actually, you're right. Yeah,
vinyl.
That was vinyl. So it was albums and cassettes. But that now, in the right time of year, we'd have a number 1 album.
Yeah.
But back then, although it was only for 1 week in terms of the sales for Germany, that was still pretty good back then. So everyone was getting really excited, thinking, this is really going to happen. This is going to take off.
375,000. That's incredible.
Yeah, but now it means it would be really something, but back then it was absolutely nothing.
So when did you move from RCA to MCA?
Well, it was quite funny because we saw that nothing was really happening on RCA. We were doing these tours, but nothing's really happening. So we wanted out. We ourselves wanted out. And we didn't realise this, but we were going to get dropped anyway. So we went to the record company and said, could we be released? And the last thing we did, we actually played Reading Festival was the last thing. That was our last sign to RCA. Thinking we'd pick up another deal really easy. And we went for 12 months without a deal before we signed to MCA, which again, which is Universal, another huge label. And it's very, very, very unusual for an unknown band to have one major and then go to another major. Because the way they look at it is, if they couldn't break you, why do you think we can break you? But at MCA, they looked at it and thought, well, RCA have done all the legwork, we should be able to do this now. And the guy who signed us was a guy called Mark Dean, and he'd discovered Wham and a band called ABC, and there was another one, I can't remember who they were now, all in the pop world, all mega stars in the pop world. And he wanted a rock band. And we were the rock band he wanted to break. So we were chuffed when we signed to him.
And was that another big deal?
I don't know how much money that was, to tell you the truth, but that was really, really big. But we signed our
in
lawyer.
The millions again. In the millions.
It was the overall would have been our lawyer. It was a guy called John Kennedy, who is still doing it, and he might be doing it for Sony now. I can't remember. He was a major lawyer at the time. And on the day of signing, we needed to sell 500,000 albums to break even. And that was on the day of signing. So it was big money.
And is that when you started doing the big budget albums and videos, the skyscraper videos? And
well, they were all big budgets, to be fair. I mean, the ones that we did with Excess All Areas, the producer was getting 45 grand advance, let alone all the money for actually doing that was just his advance for starting. When we signed to...
And were these in the UK or in America?
They were signed in the UK, but we actually recorded in Holland. We went over to a little place called Bladderken by Amsterdam and recorded those, which was fantastic. When we went to America, that was with RCA because they really wanted to break us in America. And one of the issues with MCA, the other way around, one of the issues with RCA is they were saying if you want to go to America, then base and tour, then the Americans got to pay for it. Because we were signed to the UK company, with MCA it was totally different. So though we'd signed to the UK company, they wanted us to go and break America. So they brought us out and put us up in LA for 4 months to record the album, which is the biggest crock of shit that's ever been recorded. Great songs, but the worst recorded album of any album anywhere. An album called Misspent Youth. If you can find a copy to have a listen to it, have a listen because that's what $400,000 can do for you.
Who was the producer?
No, that was a guy.
You stayed at the Burbank Suites, right?
Say again.
You stayed at the Burbank Suites.
We paid at the Oakwoods in
the Oakwoods, yeah.
Which fantastic place to stay. Loads of bands staying there at the same time. So he gave you the real good fear factor. You felt like superstars. And that was a great period. We'd opened in A recording, we're going to the Rainbow. and meeting all these other rock stars and stuff like that and hanging out in them. So you start to get into that area where you think this is going to be it, until you get the album that we recorded, which we could do in this little studio here. We could easily do a better job. But the guy who did it was a guy called Roy Thomas Baker, he did a lot of the Cars, Foreigner. He did Bohemian Rhapsody for Queen. And he was a mega hero for me and Tony, the singer. So we thought this is going to be an awesome record. The guy was just a twat. So it ended up as...
We're going to make the best promo bit out of that. That's going to be the clip that works.
So it was crap. And we took it and we toured. But the video, which was awesome actually, and we did the video, that was $100,000 just to do the video. So they were throwing money at it. But the bottom line is the old saying goes, you can't shine shit. And it was awful, you know. And
what was the video? What was the video?
Give us all you got.
Which one was that?
On the skyscraper.
Can you tell us about it?
So, MCA had an idea, and this was just when MTV was breaking through, and there's loads of bands who were getting famous on the back of MTV, and so desperately needed to get on it, and so there was a video story that was put forward for another band, and the other band, and I don't know where they were, but the other band didn't have the balls to do it. So we said, we'll do it. And it was on a skyscraper that was being built in New York, Times Square. The first 7 floors were built. The rest of it was the scaffolding. And we were on the 44th floor. And they built the staging and everything on the 44th floor for us. And the way we had to go up this is one of these metal cages that go up and down the side of a building when you see the builders on them. And the video is awesome. I have to say the video is absolutely awesome. If you go onto YouTube, give it all you got. Shy England, as we were called in America. Have a watch. And it's a great video. But unfortunately, it was deemed too dangerous by the heads of MTV. And they thought people might copy it and go on to build it and stuff like that. So it was banned. It couldn't make it up. $100,000. And what was funny, because the reason it was so expensive, they had to pay off the builders who were building the building. They had to pay them off for 2 days. And it was quite funny because all they knew were there was a band coming to shoot a video. And in New York at that time, there was The Who and U2. So they were having bets on which band it was going to be, and then we turned up.
So for context for people, the reason it was dangerous was it was just scaffolding. There was no health and safety. There was no harnesses or straps.
There was nothing.
You could have literally dropped off the edge.
We could have. And there's a part in the video where Tony Mills, the singer, does go on the outside of the building for the one part of the shot, and you'll see it if anybody watches the video. And he's holding onto the wire to stop him falling down. Now, this building where we are was actually higher than the Empire State Building. There's a Chrysler Building, and we were up there with the Chrysler Building, and he went over the side with no safety, no nothing. And the flooring was like corrugated tin. And the guy is shooting the video, and you've got to remember the cameras back in them days, we've got dirty great TV cameras, and he's got this big thing on his shoulder, and he falls through the floor, and the only thing that stops him is hanging onto the camera, and the camera is so big, it's bigger than the hole. So he's holding onto the camera, his feet dangling out underneath, and people have to go and rescue him.
How have you never told us that?
You know? Things are coming to me.
That's insane.
Yeah, that was me.
I mean, for anyone that's been to New York and been up the Rockefeller or the Chrysler or anything and looked over, the idea of actually doing that.
That was nuts. I mean, but seriously, it is a great video. In terms of everything we did, that is probably the best thing we did that I think really stands up against anything that any of the other bands were doing at the time. The record is absolutely shite. I have to say that it came from. The recording is genuinely awful. And I always said if I had had the money, I would have redone it, just to prove how good the album could have been. But the video's great.
Is that the one that was being done when I was born?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Oh, we should point out to anyone that doesn't know, this is actually my dad.
Yeah, so it is a bit weird me relating stories that I think I've probably told about 50 times.
No, but like half of this you actually haven't.
No.
We've heard like little bits. Mostly it comes from mum and not you.
That's true, yeah.
Is that the one because the story she always tells is how she was in hospital in labour and then you flew.
Oh, yeah, that's true, yeah. That was the recording of the record. Yeah, that's true. We were recording the record, and obviously this was in the period when you were about to be born. So it was quite funny. I got the phone call that Jack's mum has gone into labour. So it's case, fuck my head, and we'll get home from LA back to Birmingham. So we booked the flight straight away. Got home, and I'm on the plane. Must be on the plane on the way home. Coming over, I had myself a little bottle of champagne and all, because I ate it. Little bottle of champagne. And when I landed, there was a message from somebody at the front of the plane, one of the stewardesses. Good Roy Day, passenger Roy Davies, blah, blah, blah. Come to the control, please. And when I got there, they told me it's a false alarm. so I had to get back down to Birmingham sort of quick. Jackie's gone home, and I'm sort of going, you can't do this to me. I've got an album to record. So basically, we went for a walk around the local golf course, because apparently a bit of energy can sort of bring it on. So we went for a walk, and I've got one more day. And we went for a walk around the golf course, which did do the trick, to be fair. Got rushed back in. So Jack was born whatever time he was born, and in about 3 hours, I'm leaving again to jump on the plane back to LA. So it was quite a good time, made me feel like a bit of a rock star.
How long were you gone for?
2 days, I think. Oh, in terms of going for the whole period?
Yeah, then coming back.
I think it was about another 8 weeks from when you were born. So I missed all the good stuff. Or all the hard stuff, you know.
That's so funny. So what happened from there? Why did the band get dropped?
Essentially, it wasn't happening. The bottom line was it really wasn't happening. We weren't happy as a band. We weren't happy with what was going on. We were sort of falling out. I'm going to keep this really polite. We were sort of falling out with Tony, the singer. And we wanted out, thinking it would be dead easy to go and get another deal. But things had changed then. In all honesty, we came back home and kept it going without Tony, and brought another guy in, somebody who had been in a band called John Ward, who was a Brummie who was living in LA at the time. And he came back, and we started doing some more recordings. We released another album after that, funny enough, called Welcome to the Madhouse, which a lot of people think is our best album. It's a totally different type of recording and whatever. And that was it was with a little independent label based in Birmingham. But it was, not a lot of money was spent on that. And we decided it's going nowhere. It's time to give it a miss, really. People started going off and doing their own things. We got no money, so unfortunately it was time to get a job, which has never been one of my favourite things in life.
No, we know that. You're never at work.
No, I'll do my best to stay away.
So can you just give a few more of the highlights of what had happened? The big things you'd done up to that point. You'd played Wembley with Bon Jovi.
Yeah, I've sort of skimmed over it, I suppose. The tours were brilliant. The tour we did with Meatloaf in particular was really funny, because Meatloaf, he was a great bloke, and he was an incredible singer, and this is probably the absolute peak of his fame, certainly in the UK. But he was quite a violent bloke, and the way we got the tour was we'd done some sort of demos with a guy called Bob Kulick, who was Meatloaf's guitar player. He also played in Kiss and loads of other stuff. And he was our mate. We'd sort of met him out in LA, and we'd sort of got to know him, and he was just our mate, really. So he'd put us forward to the Meatloaf tour. So we're in the middle of the tour. We're in a place, I think it was somewhere down in Brighton. And it was all after the show. We're at the hotel where we're staying. And we always did like that. We had a certain attitude. There's no getting past it. We were rock stars without anybody knowing and without the money. But in our heads, we were absolute rock stars, and we were staying at this hotel, and we're all sitting around talking and joking and laughing, and Meatloaf's on the other side of the room with his lot. And there's a group of salesmen in the hotel, and I hate salesmen. I mean, everybody who knows me I can't stand them. They sell the grannies. So basically, there's these salesmen sitting by us, and they started taking the piss out of us and our hair and what we were wearing. So I sort of started mouthing off at this salesman. I was wearing a long sort of silver scarf at the time, and he jumped over, grabbed my scarf and pulled me to the floor. Meatloaf see this. He dived up, come running across. You fucking motherfucker, I'll fucking kill you. And he jumped onto this guy and started pummeling the shit out of him, which is fantastic. So so they had to get him off. Meatloaf, I'm mortified really. I'm saying, I'm so sorry, so. And Bob Cooley comes up to him and goes, man, he said, that's the best thing you could have done. Meatloaf's needed up for ages. So, and the next time we see it happen, we are playing Wembley with Meatloaf. And suddenly we're backstage at Wembley and we're all shouting, this guy running along the corridor, running for his life. And the guy was Bob Kulick. And what had happened was Meatloaf hadn't paid him for the tour. And he had the audacity to say, if you don't pay me, I ain't going on. So the next person to get killed was going to be Bob Kulick. So Meat's chasing him. No, so I called him Meat because he's my mate. And he's chasing him along the corridors of backstage at Wembley, which is absolutely hilarious. We did Bon Jovi. That was another one that was really funny. We did that the NIA in Birmingham. And what had happened was, basically, it wasn't our tour. He was touring with Lita Ford, and we weren't gigging. And I'd gone out with your mum. We were having a row, most unusual for us. So we've gone to a garden centre. And obviously, there's no mobile phones and that in those days. And we'd had a row, so we'd come home early. And there was a note through the door that basically said, you need to get in touch with Neil Levine immediately, who was our manager. You've got to play the NEC tonight. And I'm thinking, this is just bollocks. This is another wind-up. It turned out it was true. And what had happened was Lita Ford was supporting Bon Jovi at the NEC, pulled out, and they asked us if we wanted to go and do it. So we went on and played with Bon Jovi. Obviously blew them off the stage because we always did. But it was so funny because we didn't get a sound check because what was happening, those were in the days where there used to be bomb scares, and there was a bomb scare at the NEC, and we were all kicked out of the building. So when it came for us to go on stage, we actually did push the gear on stage as we were going on and just launched into it, which was, but we had a great one. I got to say, we did have a great one.
One of the things that we've heard a lot over the years is how you pissed off everybody. You got banned from lots of things as a band. You got blacklisted from HMV.
We were brilliant. I mean, we pissed off everybody, and it's quite funny, really. Essentially, we were just a bunch of blokes from Birmingham who happened to be in a very good band. And live, we were awesome live. There's no, we were shit on record. It never came out on record, but live we were brilliant. And we would have played with anybody. And on a lot of the major bands we supported, we did piss them off, and we did blow them off. I mean, that's just the way it was. And that's not being big-headed or an ego. That's just sort of what happened. But on the back of that, we also had a certain attitude. So we did piss everybody off, and it was quite funny. The crew we used, now the reason we used this crew is because of our attitude. And these guys they used to be Black Sabbath crew, and they were used because they had to look after Ozzy Osbourne. And we did a gig in Spain where Tony the singer got so pissed and he started headbutting house bricks and things like this. And this is one of my proudest moments, really. Because when we were on the bus afterwards, the guys who'd been looking after Ozzy come up to us and they said, never, ever, ever, in his wildest moments, was Ozzy Osbourne ever as bad as Tony Mills. And I thought, fuck me, that's good. So it was one of them. And when we got, we did get banned, it wasn't HMV, there used to be a record chain called Our Price Records.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a big end of year event for MCA Records, a global event. They invited everybody from all over the world into their events, but no one could take their partners. Even if you worked at the company, they couldn't take their wives or boyfriends or anything. It was the absolute rule of the event. It was a huge event. And what happened was, it turned out I was pissed off because I couldn't take your mum. And the way we were all sitting was man, woman, man, woman, man, woman. So I'm sitting there, and I've got pissed, and I'm sitting next to this woman next to me. This was good, because I can still remember doing it. And we were vegetarian. I was vegetarian at the time, and she's sitting next to me, and she's got this dirty grade steak. And I pick up my knife or fork, and put it in her steak, and go, you fucking slag, what are you doing here? What do you do? So obviously she wasn't impressed, and I put the steak in my pocket and kept it. And it turns out that she was the head buyer for Uprawr Records. So we were banned, and that was the major thing. If you can't get in those record stores, quite plainly, you can't sell your records. So we were banned from that, which didn't do us any good, and it didn't. But there was loads of those things where we pissed people off, because we genuinely didn't care. We were just having a laugh. I mean, when we were touring with Gary Moore, Ozzy Osbourne, who was trying to escape the country at the time, and Sharon had taken his passport and stuff off him, so he couldn't, and he'd shaved his head and all that type of stuff. And because he knew our crews, he came to see us at Hammersmith Odeon, and he tried to hide in the hold of the tour bus, and we told him to fuck off because we're going to be bigger than him. Obviously, that didn't quite work out.
Do you think it affected your career, pissing everyone off, or would it have not made a difference?
No, at the end of the day, we went to this big posh restaurant in LA called the Dome that used to be frequented by all the movie stars more than rock stars. It was a movie star place. And it was bizarre. So they took us to this place because they wanted us to play up. They wanted us to create. But the ridiculous thing was they stuck us in a side room where nobody could see her anyway. And I can always remember the food coming out, and Steve, the guitar player, who never did anything. He never drunk. He didn't do drugs. I mean, none of us did drugs except Tony would have a go. But the food came out, and he's lost the plot. Steve was saying, this is fucking shit. Said, McDonald's is better than this and all the rest, which is true, because it was all artificial pan stuff. But people used to go there, and the idea was to make us like Guns N' Roses. And at the end of the day, you can do what you like as long as you're selling records. So everything we did, and it wasn't, we were just having a laugh. We were just really having a laugh. If we'd have sold 1 million records, then everything would have been absolutely fine, and no one would have given a toss. But because we weren't, then obviously they did give a toss, and we gave them a great excuse to drop us.
So following that, then you lose the record deal, you stop working with it, you leave the band.
So we got to the stage where we in actual fact, the band has never ever split up. I mean, Steve, the guitar player, he had a horrible illness with a brain tumour that sort of dragged on and on. Poor old Tony, again, it turned out that he had a pancreatic cancer, so again, horrible. So we never split up, but people did change. When we left the major deal with Tony, we recruited John Ward. We tried carrying on with that at the same time as working jobs. But it was when we were doing that I started getting involved in other sides of the business, really. So it worked out okay for me, because I started learning about management and publishing and different sides and the way labels work, simply because I started hanging out with the so-called band manager at the time, a guy called Tony Sylvester, who used to tell us he managed Duran Duran. He didn't. He was tour manager of Duran Duran, and he was our financial director with Duran Duran. But by doing that, I started to see how other sides of the business worked, and that's what kept me involved, really.
So how did you get from there to opening the studios?
Well, it was quite funny, because what had happened was I was sort of managing the band myself, and we'd got this deal with a small label. It was funded by films, a guy called Gary Smith, who you've met and still in touch with Gary, and Gary's a great bloke. And he invested a lot of money into the band and into the independent label. but we weren't making any money ourselves. So we had to think of something that we'd done. I started a transport company. The transport company was doing okay because the only other thing I can do in life was drive. So started that. That started doing quite well, but I was losing the will to live. And so what happened was your mum, who'd always wanted a rehearsal room, and we decided, well, let's do the rehearsal rooms. That was all down to her. That was nothing to do with me, really. She wanted to do it. I always didn't want to do it because if you're going to work for yourself, I really believe you've got to have the facility to grow it and grow it and grow it. And on the rehearsal rooms, the way I looked at it was, you've got 10 rooms, you're charging by the hour. The most you can possibly make can be 10 rooms, booked out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but that is a finite amount, which never interested me. But your mum saw it for what it was, and we decided, well, let's make our living, not try to get rich, but just to make our living out of still being involved with bands. And so that's what we did. We set up the rehearsal rooms. But of course, what happens when you're surrounded by bands and involved in bands, me, the way I am, and I'm just a nosy bastard who wants to know everybody's business when they're in a band, started getting involved with bands again, and sort of dabbling in bits of management and all that sort of stuff. And the one thing I did find out, that obviously on the publishing side of things, which I never wrote any of the songs, but I used to get a cut because I used to do a lot of the stuff that the other guys in the band couldn't do. So I set up my own publishing company, again, not knowing anything about publishing whatsoever, but I set it up anyway, and set up a small publishing company called One Spit Music. And the idea for that was just to collect our own band's royalties and some of my mates who weren't getting any royalties, although they should have done, and collecting for them. So I started to learn out about publishing and set up the publishing company, One Spit Music.
And that was at the same time as opening the studios?
That was pretty much the same time as opening the studio. It was all working together, really.
Can you talk through the process of opening the studio, how you found the place, how you financed it, how you designed it?
Well, it was dead weird because obviously we'd got no money, so it was, and we had no idea whatsoever of how to raise money or get money. But the one guy who did was the guy who was working with us with Shy, this Tony Sylvester guy who used to. And he was, the reason he got involved with Duran Duran, and he was with them in the biggest days, he worked for a massive accountancy firm in Birmingham, and he'd done loads of work on famous rich people's accounts and making sure they kept their money rather than giving it to the taxman. And he'd worked, he'd done some stuff for Paul McCartney, and because he'd done it for Paul McCartney and saved a load of money, when Duran Duran had heard about this guy and they needed somebody to help them save money, they got in touch with Tony Sylvester, and he ended up giving up his job with the accountancy firm and staying with Duran Duran as their financial guy. And we met him through somebody else, funny enough, through somebody involved with Elton John, it turned out, so I can't remember his name now. And we just got on with him, so he stayed with us. And when we decided to try and do the rehearsal rooms, I knew exactly what I wanted in a rehearsal room and what the rehearsal room should be like, but no idea of raising money. So I got in touch with Tony Sylvester and asked him, do you want to be our suit? He was going to be the guy who's going to get the money for us. And he wanted to do that. He wanted to be involved. And as it turned out, he was working with another local guy called Muff Murphy, who very famous in the area. He's got a studio called the Old Smithy. And he asked Muff if Muff wanted to be involved. And Muff did. So essentially, they put up the money to build the rehearsal rooms. Yeah, so what had happened was, when we decided to do the rehearsal rooms, the one thing I knew, we'd been in rehearsal rooms all over the world. And the thing was, in any rehearsal room complex, you got some good rooms, you got crap rooms, you got rooms that nobody wants to use. So I decided, a bit like McDonald's, and that was the model, really. Any McDonald's in the world is exactly the same as every other McDonald's. So I thought, well, what we'll do, we'll market the rehearsal rooms that they're the same. Every single room was the same. You'd have the same gear in it. And the idea was that whatever room you were in sounded the same as the other rooms. So it didn't matter if you couldn't get room 11 or room 12, because room 3 sounded exactly the same. And the idea then, we thought, well, actually, if we're going to do this, using the idea of a Premier Inn. If you only had one Premier Inn, then there's no money to be made. If you had Premier Inns all around the country, there was loads of money to be made. So we then got into the idea that maybe the way you can really make some money out of the rehearsal rooms was to have the one in Birmingham and put them all over the country, which again needed loads and loads of money. So we then got involved in the idea of trying to raise that money, which we needed 2 million quid, which is vast money now, but back then was ridiculous money. And we almost, it's always almost, isn't it, really? We almost raised the money. We got a guy from South Wales, which is quite interesting because my whole musical life seems to be based around South Wales. We almost got the money, and lo and behold, the great crash of 2008, 2009, whatever it was, happened. And the guy who was going to arrange the money didn't have the money anymore because of what happened to his own business. So we never moved on, but we kept the rehearsal rooms exactly the same. And from that point of view, people, you do get your favourite room because you just get a feel for the room, but generally they all stay the same.
And what was the learning curve with running the business? And what was the division between you and Mum? Because I remember her doing all the marketing and all the staff stuff.
It was quite funny because we knew nothing about business whatsoever. I'm firmly of a belief, if you want to do something, you just have to go and do it. So I started doing, I knew about the room, so I knew what gear I wanted in the rooms. I knew what bands wanted in the rooms. But then on the other side of the coin, it was your mum who did all the marketing. She made it happen. She'd go down to all the local record shops. She'd fly the record shops. We'd take the girls who were working in, we'd take them down and sort of giving all leaflets out. That was all down to her. All the meeting and greeting, which when we got the venue, obviously became really useful. That is all down to your mum. The saying is, we'll jacky somebody, and that is exactly what we do. If there's anybody being arsey, we throw your mum in, because she can handle all the people. She's got the people. I mean, I've got no people skills, as you well know. Any way whatsoever,
I get mine from you, which is
yeah, you've learned it all from me because you've got none either. But so it really was the rehearsal rooms, and was definitely a two-pronged attack. And without her, the rehearsal room wouldn't have happened because I'd have certainly never done them. And moving and developing in the venue, realistically, all the meet and greets and anything of that is down to your mum.
Why did you open the venue and how did that start?
Well, with the venue, it's quite funny because we'd always had the one side of the building. We leased the building, which is split into two halves, and basically the people who we leased it from, we had like a sublease, and their lease with what's called the superior landlord had run out. Now, there was no issue with us carrying on with that, but the problem is they were going to turn the next side of it, into a heavy machinery pressing plant. So the noise of that, even though we're soundproof and one, that noise would have wiped us out. So the only way we could stop that would be to buy the building and then decide what to do with that side of the building. Now, I always liked the idea of a venue because I did a lot of work in the 90s with touring bands in Germany and in Europe, being their roadie and driving a van for them. So basically, I'd seen how the Germans in particular built their venues. So the idea is, well, we could use that space to build a venue, and it wouldn't cost so much money, because we do it mostly ourselves. So what we had to do, we had to get loans and whatever to build the venue. But we did it very basically, but very cool. It was the idea of following on from what I'd learned in Germany, really. And that's what we did. But building the venue was the easy part. What we had no concept of was going to be was how hard it was going to be to get the bands to come and play the venue.
What did you expect to happen?
Well, in my naivety, because I knew hundreds of bands, I just thought, oh yeah, I'll tell them I've got a venue and they're going to come and play. Obviously, it doesn't work like that one little bit. Obviously, I knew about agents because over the years we'd just got to know, even though we never actually had one with the band, we knew what they did. And then came the job of dealing with the agents, which they had no concept who we were. So it was obviously very, very hard.
So how difficult is it to make the venue profitable and to have a gig that actually makes money?
Well, the thing, what was interesting, all the venues in Birmingham at that time were doing club nights. And I'd vowed we were going to be the difference. We're never going to have a club night. You know, we were going to just be a venue with no club nights. But obviously it couldn't happen. And then obviously you and Lewis came along and started developing Uprawr, which obviously was mega successful. And, you know, and everybody was falling over themselves to be involved in Uprawr. And because of the Uprawr brand and the way the agents had seen how you promoted that, that was how we started to get the bands because of the Uprawr name. And I remember the first guy who really got involved was Tom Taff. It was really, really helpful. But the only reason we got the bands in the first place was down to the Uprawr Club Night because of the promotion that you guys were doing. I hate to say that, but...
So how do you make a venue successful this year? Get this guy involved?
Yeah.
Yeah. So separately to that then, you got the venue, you got the studios, you started managing bands, or you'd always been involved in that, and you started working with those Don Crows.
Well, there was a big sort of lull or thing in between, really. I just didn't realise how good I was at doing all this stuff, I have to be honest. No, I mean, there's so much going on. And again, really, I'd started doing the publishing, which I liked. I did enjoy doing the publishing because that got me going out to seeing bands again, but on a different type of stuff. And I was because of my. I'm trying to put this in order. What had happened was actually it was down to your mum. Oh God, I can't believe this. This was down to your mum again. I remember we'd done a Christmas album. We recorded it, or your mum had recorded a Christmas album. It was down to her, really, of all tribute bands doing Christmas songs. And basically, we were trying to get a release for it. And there's lots of events, music events around the world. And the one that turned up that year was a thing called PopCon that happened in Berlin. I think we went out to PopCon, didn't we? I can't remember, in Cologne or something.
Yeah, a couple of times.
But anyway, it was happening in Berlin. And so me and your mum went over to the event, and she was stropping because nobody was doing any work. Everyone was just walking around and drinking beer and all the rest of it. And we needed something to eat. And basically we went to a Chinese food store or whatever it was, Chinese takeaway thing in Berlin. And they didn't speak any English. It was Chinese people speaking German. And as we were there, some brummie comes up to us, well, we can tell where you're from, all right, and all the rest, and started taking the piss, which your mum turns around and has a go, and asked them to do the ordering for us. And it turns out this was a guy called John Saunderson, who was now my best mate in music, really. But John Saunderson worked for a company called Notting Hill Publishing. And I knew Notting Hill Publishing from years and years ago. Because we did an admin deal with them, with a guy called Pete Shelcroft. And there was 3 owners, and Pete was one of them. So when we sort of reconnected in Berlin, John's brilliant, and he kept in touch. So on the back of keeping in touch, they offered to do the admin for me for One Spit Music. And that was how I started getting involved with Notting Hill, really. And where it really came about was obviously Better Tomorrow. So obviously Better Tomorrow at the time, the 2 brothers were DJing for Uprawr.
Yeah.
And they'd got the band. And funny enough, they had played at the Asylum. One of the very first gigs was Better Tomorrow with some other bands where they were really sort of new. And on the back of you knowing the guys from Better Tomorrow, we bought them in. We'd sort of decided we were going to do publishing, Uprawr Music Publishing, as an offshoot of One Spit Music Publishing. And I think they may have been the first band that...
Yeah, they were. So I don't think I ever told anyone this until Saturday, because it was Mouth Culture here.
Oh, right, yeah.
And they're managed by Jamie Osman, who manages Bury Tomorrow. So when me and Lewis spoke to, I don't know if it was David or Danny from Bury Tomorrow, but they said for some reason it came up in conversation that their publishing was available, and me and Lewis just lied and said that we had a publishing company and they should sign to us, and they were just like, yes, sick, let's do it. And then we came to you and said, we need you to sort out a deal with Notting Hill. You set up the joint venture with Notting Hill, and then we signed Bury Tomorrow. But when we offered them the deal originally, we didn't even have a...
We didn't.
company. We were just bullshitting.
Well, it was on the back of that, really, that the relationship really formed with Notting Hill, because it was joint venture, and then they ended up giving us some of the money, and I think they ended up buying it there, I can't remember now. But they ended up putting the money up for them and any other band that we actually wanted to sign.
Yeah.
And that's how it started with Notting Hill, and that was bizarrely through your mum introducing us to John Saunderson through having a strop in Berlin, and David and Danny working for Uprawr as DJs.
Yeah.
So it's very, very weird the way things work. And obviously we still have Bury Tomorrow. That I'm heading towards world domination. We've got a great relationship with Jamie now, so yeah, it's all good, all really, really good.
So how did that develop then into managing?
Well, it was again another. It's all weird stories, really. So I decided I wanted to get back into managing, and was looking for a band, and everybody kept telling me about this band called Stonebroken, and I didn't. I knew who was sort of looking after them, and it sounded like a pub band to me, I have to say. It really sounded like a pub band, Stonebroken. And what happened was we had a guy working for us in the studio, Mark, somebody, I can't remember his name. It was a really, really cynical guy. And he'd worked in studios in London. But he turned around and said, you've got to look at this band called Stonebroken, which I did. Absolutely love Stonebroken. Got in touch with the manager and said, I'd really like to actually get involved. And incredibly, he said, watch this space tomorrow. And the very next day, he announced a big recording deal. As it turned out, it was with Frontiers Records. So I said, no, I don't want the recording, I want the publishing. And he said, I've signed the publishing over as well, which bad move. But anyway, as it moved on, they moved from Frontiers. But I was gutted. I'd actually missed them. And again, it was a woman called Karen Talbot, who you know.
Yeah.
And Paul, and she basically said, well, if you like Stonebroken, you've got to listen to my mate's band. And it's one of those things you always hear, you've got to listen to my mate's band, they're always shite. But basically, she sent me the links to Those Damn Crows, links to the videos, and they were just fucking awesome. From that moment, your mum listened, she thought they were awesome, and she said, you got to get them. So I got in touch with Those Damn Crows, and offered to manage them. And, they were up for it at the time because nothing was really happening.
You gave them the first ever gig, didn't you?
The first gig? No, I didn't give them the first gig. They were all...
I thought that was here up in the asylum too.
No, that was just the first gig. They'd been gigging before, but the bottom line is they couldn't get arrested at that stage, really. I thought they were the best band on the planet and started really going out and meeting people and talking about them. And what was fantastic, John Norman at Planet Rock, he picked up on them. And audiences just love them, So I managed to get involved with those right at the beginning. We got them signed to E-Rate Records, and we got them signed to Ross Warnock as the agent, which was fantastic. And in the lockdown, I decided I wanted to sort of move out of it, but carry on with the publishing. And they hooked up with Future History, which is Ryan, who's got Sleep Token, and then the rest is history sort of thing. And that was my sort of meeting with them. But working with Those Damn Crows, again, introduced me to so many people, because what happened was, as they started on their march to domination, everybody wanted them. All the gigs wanted them, all the agents wanted them, and whatever. So it's a great learning curve, and you start meeting people on the back of that.
And on the publishing side of that, they've just had their number one. told us we weren't allowed to bring this in. So we just brought it in without you knowing.
Yeah.
You've actually got the official #1 charts trophy that was presented to you at a publishing awards.
It's a publishing awards
last week or the week before.
Yeah, well, that was brilliant because when they signed to Earache were pretty much a hardcore label. I'd known of Earache for many years, obviously, and unbeknown to Earache, I'd negotiated deals on behalf of artists where basically Earache had no concept that I was involved with it. So I had a good idea what was going on there. And when we signed to Earache, it was interesting because they were just crossing over and trying to sign Main Street bands that had Rival Sons, which had gone pretty good. That had Temperance Movement, which obviously gone pretty good. So the Crows were sort of next in line, really. And what Earache are brilliant at doing is charting in the first week. Absolutely fantastic. So we charted in the top 20. I can't remember. There was something like number 14 or something like that on the first record. On the next record, I think it was number 3. I can't remember. And then on the last record, absolutely brilliantly, they charted first week #1, which is brilliant. And it was brilliant for me because it was justification that the band were going to be huge, and they are going to be huge. So
they're as good as you've been telling everyone for the last.
And what was interesting, just another little add on to this, really. Right at the beginning, when I'd started managing them, James and Barry, who were managing Stone Broken, who were great guys, get on with them really well. I asked them to come down and see them play at the Barfly in London. I just wanted them to see my band. That was only, they'd got Stone Broken, who signed to Universal, all going fantastic. This is before the Crows had signed to Earache. I just wanted them to come down and see my band. So they came down and seen them, and the band were awesome. And James in particular wrote me a critique of their performance, and and it wasn't a good one. He hated them, and it was quite funny. So at the end of it all, the final line was, "At the end of the day, Roy, they're just a good pub band." So I wrote back to Barack saying, "Were you drunk? Were you on drugs? You fucking nutter." This is war. Though we're both stable mates, this is war for world domination. And James and Barry were really good, actually. So when Stone Broken were going on tour, basically they allowed those damn Crows to go out with them. Worst thing they ever did. Because we fucking mullered them every night. And I love Stone Broken, but we did. And I always remember James came up to me after the London show, Islington Academy, I think it was, and he came up. He says, "You were right, boy. Well done." And I said, "Yeah, not bad for a fucking pub band." And every time they cross a new thing, I always put it out there that not bad for a pub band. So, but it's all in good humour, but we all know.
With the publishing, how do you find new people? How do you decide what to offer them? And how do you recoup?
Well, it's slightly different now because I'm now part of Notting Hill, the company, whereas before it was a joint venture. And essentially, they've always backed me. I mean, they're brilliant. They've always backed me on whoever I wanted to sign. There was one band, actually, they didn't, but I think it was something that went on in the background. I won't name the band because they might watch it. But I think that might have been some personal or whatever was going on. So they've always backed me. The difference was they sort of restructured their own company in the new year and offered me an idea. They basically, they would sort of buy my catalogue and bring me into the company, which was a great deal for me because what it did, it gave me access to their funds, really. The difference is now I have to sort of, not promote, what's the word? I have to do sort of, I'm trying to think of the word. What's the word? A presentation. That's the word. You have to sort that out. So what I have to do now, I have to do it like a presentation for the band, to the other members of Notting Hill to bring any band in. But generally, a lot of the times people come to us asking, we're looking for publishing. Or John Saunderson, who's brilliant, he's the equivalent of your mum. He's immense people person, and he will contact bands and basically say to them, "We love your band. Are you up for publishing?" and all that type of stuff. So there's all different ways of doing it. And then in terms of the money we offer them, obviously every band is different depending on the level of success that the bands have got. Or if there's back catalogue involved, obviously if they're going to bring back catalogue a lot, then we can go for it. So it's all different. It's all different ways of actually assessing what we think they work. But the other side of the coin, we still only work with the bands we actually want to work with and bands who we actually like as people. So I'm still very much come to it from a band person as well, which is quite funny really, because every band, there's a tosser in every band. It doesn't matter how big the band is, there's somebody in there who's a pain in the arse. And it's quite funny because I was that pain in the arse. I was the one who used to stare at people and go, well, what are you going to do for us then? So consequently, when I first meet a band and we sit down, I know instantaneously who that guy is, which is quite funny.
Which one is it in those Sam Chorus? I'll text them.
Well, the Crows are a great example because they are genuinely a band, a democratic sort of thing. Yeah. So it was always Ronnie put the band together, and obviously Shane's a singer. So it's all, normally in every band, everybody assumes it's a singer who writes everything, and the guitar player. But theirs is a genuine democracy, and it isn't like that at all. And they were always, to be fair, they were always brilliant. As the success got, and it was quite funny because I sat down with the Crows, and when you plan what you're going to do, and everybody says they want world domination by this time next year, they want to be headlining, Download, and all this type of stuff. But we were really realistic, and I sort of said what we need to do, and I used Stone Broken as an example. I said, in a year's time, all we want is all the people who know Stone Broken, we want them to know who you are. Whether they've heard you or not, all we want them to do is know the name of those damn Crows. And as it turned out, within 12 months, all those Stone Broken fans did know the name, and most of them had seen the band. And it used to be really exciting. I mean, it's still exciting going to see them, but now the audience are there, they love them, and all that type of stuff. But where it was great with the Crows is going to a gig where nobody's ever heard of them and watching the audience by the end would be in awe. And they are. I mean, without doubt, for me personally, Shane is the best frontman in the country by a fucking mile. In that world, by a mile.
Have you got any more future plans or goals that you want to work towards?
Well, I'd like a house in Cannes, I think. Somewhere in Ibiza and somewhere in LA might be good. In future, I mean, obviously things are going really, really well with Notting Hill at the moment. We're signing bands all the time. I'm very close to signing a new young band. By the time this goes out, hopefully I'll have this band called, and I think are going to be that. I think they are going to change things because at the moment, the rock world, which is obviously my world, most of the audiences are old. I think are going to be the band. They look like a band like it used to be. They've got long hair. They wear cool clothes. They're not in check shirts. Nothing wrong with you bands out there in check shirts, but come on, let's look like a band. So basically, they are one of those type of bands, and I genuinely believe that they are going to bring young people back into rock music. So if I can be part of that at the beginning, that'll be exciting. And it's always great. It's great working with new bands, especially when people don't like them or say, "Yeah, I can't really see where that's going to go." Which happens most of the time. And then those bands breaking through, because it really is an ego trip for me, which is worth more than the money.
That's lucky, haven't it?
Is it very true? Yeah.
What advice would you give to somebody that was looking to start a band or start working in music?
I think when you start a band, you genuinely, well, we always knew, even before Shy, we always knew how good we were or how good we weren't. I was really lucky, because I was a shit bass player, but I was cool. So, I mean, that's just the way it was.
We're going to put some pictures up and people can vote on this.
But, okay, I look cool for the day. So it was always one of those things. But I was lucky. We always had what was believed to be a world-class singer, genuinely a world-class singer. And I've always worked with incredible guitar players. I've always worked with incredible musicians. So if you're going to start a band, you have to know that you're good. You have to, which is easy, but most bands know when they're good or they're not good, really. It's like when a band puts an album out, we all know what a filler track is. You've got your grade tracks and you've got your filler tracks. If you're good, then, and I remember going to an event years and years ago and somebody saying this, I think it was a Smashing Pumpkins manager, who basically said, if you're good, the industry know you're out there. And I'll never believe that, because you've worked so hard at trying to get the industry interested in your band. And realistically, now I'm on the other side. I am that wanker who used to receive the demos or cassettes in those days and sort of listen to the first 3 seconds, say, this is shite, and throw it away. Or say, oh, this is good. I am that person now. But I also know if you are good, the industry do know you're out there. And they will be watching you and they will be looking at what's going on. So really, what you have got these days as well is Spotify and all the various things that we didn't have back then. You can send links to all your music and stuff like that. But seriously, you don't have to worry about being picked up because people know you're there. That's absolutely for certain. But you have got to be good.
Awesome. I think that's a pretty good thing to end it on.
Cool.
Is there anything you want to mention before we finish?
Anything I forgot? I mean, this is where I start slagging you normally. But can I do it? You know, they cut it off anyway.
I don't have control. It's Joe.
What's Joe, my special son?
We actually have turned this around and presented Joe as the number one knob as well in the family. So,
No, I think that's it. I think there's probably loads I've missed out that could have been funny.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on. We've been doing the podcast now for a few years, and this is the first time you've actually agreed.
I'd like to say it's been a pleasure, but
you should have heard the abuse that we were getting before this started.
And I have to say,
and the tantrum he had when we asked him to not put the cup on the table.
I can do it now.
Yeah,
there you go. I'll have to watch this one.
Yeah, you can. I won't. Thank you to everyone that's watched and listened. Please follow, rate, and review wherever you get podcasts, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.
Bye, peeps.
I'm still looking at these questions. Fucking hundreds. There's 25 questions here. I've usually got about 11.
Is that all? That's all my life's work to you. 25 fucking questions.
I wouldn't have asked half of them. And go, half of them. Yeah. You what?
I said you don't ask.
That's because he writes them like gibberish.
I'm going to tick them off.
You should see these fucking... Me, Mr. Dyslexic, and even I read Joe's work and I'm like, the fuck is this?
This is fucking boring. No wonder you can't get any guests. Jesus.
If it gets too hot, the radiator is beyond jack, so you can just turn it off.
That's why my fucking electric bill's on.
We leave it on permanently as well.
I believe that.
See, this is why I tell them to do it before Dad's locked.
Jesus. Perfect cure for insomnia.
You think that he's never met you?
I wanted to see what the fucking questions were.
Who's first question? Who's your favourite son?
If he acts like this with you, imagine what he's like guest.
Okay. Yeah, so we don't do an intro or anything. We just, it goes straight in. Like,
Can you hear me this far away?
no. So you need that like right up by you.
Just put it towards you.
As if he was like,
I've been never going in. Oh, it's in the way me take me drink now.
drink needs to go on there. and then probably a
So
little bit.
in this, then all I've got, the camera is that in front of my face.
So, well, I mean, if I was you, I'd want a bigger mic.
Is that all right? Okay.
Yeah.